Welcome to Still Learning, our Come Follow Me podcast, where we are winding up our study of church history and the Doctrine and Covenants. I'm Rebecca Burnham, and I'm here with my co-host, Gunnar Michael Anderson. And today we're dealing with the Proclamation on the Family.
It's a wonderful proclamation. Came out in 1995. I had just been a member of the church for 3 years when the proclamation came out. And I remember I thought, why are we saying this? Yes. Right? It did not seem like something unusual to me or my wife at the time. And I had no idea that it would become so meaningful to so many of us some 20, 25, 30 years later.
That's really interesting. Tell me more. What struck you as most important over the last 20 years?
Most important. So let me tell you why I hesitate.
Yeah.
There are categories of importance. Things that are important to me to keep in mind. Right? As a husband and father. And there are things that might be different than things that I think are important for society, for culture, that might also be different than things that are doctrinally important.
Right.
So if I kind of walk through those things, if you can just bear with me as I think through them.
Yeah.
I think that as a society, it's the last statement that I think is important in the proclamation, which I'll read here in just a minute, but which I also want to just caution all of us who embrace the family proclamation that it can become something extreme. And I don't mean it in its extreme form. So let me just read it quickly. We call upon responsible citizens and officers of government everywhere to promote those measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society. Now, for me, just culturally, what that means to me is don't forget about the family, and let's look at ourselves culturally and see what are there things that we are doing that are maybe irresponsible as a society, that maybe we need some government support to corral. I think it's very easy to say, okay, that's talking about gender, that's talking about LGBTQ issues, that's talking about same-sex marriage, that we should be having laws against all these things. This is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, as a society, what kinds of things are really destructive to the family? It's easy to jump on those sort of social issues. The ones that I'm concerned about are things where, as a society, we are not helping parents raise their children. We have created a society where both mom and dad have to work, have to string themselves out. They might have to work multiple jobs. They maybe have to work very, very long hours just to pay the rent and put the cheapest of foods on the table. And they're not there raising their kids. And so what is raising their kids? It's the morality that's in video games. It's the morality that's we might have R-rated movies. We might have TVMA rated TV shows. We have nothing blocking young kids from watching this stuff, right? There might be parental controls, but the parents have to be involved in order to do that. We're surrounded by so much technology that we can't be experts on all the technology. My son gave me an iWatch for my birthday or Christmas. I'm like, we're a sweet gift. This was shortly after they came out. I wore that watch for about a month and I got rid of it. I did not like the fact that it was interrupting me all the time. Yeah, you can change those settings, right? But then it would do a software update and I had to worry about the software update. And then that software update had to be consistent with whatever update I had on my phone. Now I'm like managing the technology, right? And then there were apps that needed to be updated. Forget it. I just, I don't, it's hard enough as it is, where I've got to worry about the technology in the car. I got to worry about the technology on my phone. Everything's got a software update. And you and I are both involved in music. I can't update the operating system without making sure that all the plugins I have for my DAW are compatible. Even my DAW is compatible with that OS, and I've got outboard equipment. It's managing technology is tough, so you're not going to manage it all. And then on top of that, I got to do all the settings on my TV, which now you're going to have half a dozen streaming platforms, which all have different ways of updating their settings, and they all have different controls. And I feel like it could be simpler, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's this big argument about gun control, for instance, in the United States, right? We've got the Bill of Rights, right to bear arms. Can't have anybody controlling that in any way, shape, or form. It seems to be the attitude of one group of people. That always comes up because there's a school shooting or some kind of mass shooting, which absolutely horrific and tragic. But the thing that I don't hear talked about is, I think it's less about the guns than it is about the video games, the violence in the video games, and the blood in the video games. And the same with movies and TV. I mean, there's some pretty violent stuff there. And I realize the games are rated TVMA, but I might get some people upset about this, but I just kind of feel like we should not be making games of killing people. I just think period. I think it's a period on the end of that sentence. My opinion. I don't think it should be, well, we need to have parental controls, or it should only be available to people who are over 18 years old or over. I just think we shouldn't do it. And I know the Family Proclamation doesn't say anything about that. But I think when we talk about we should promote measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society, it's not a far stretch to say, well, let's not teach our kids that it's fun to kill people. It doesn't talk about killing at all in this Family Proclamation.
It doesn't.
But I also don't believe that the church should be putting money behind political action committees that are designed to restrict the rights of people who don't agree with us about certain moral things. I don't think we should do that. So there's two controversial opinions. Do you want to try for a third?
Well, I want to say, Gunnar, shortly after the Proclamation on the Family came out, I became a pro-family lobbyist.
Yeah.
So I went to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. It was 2000 or 2001. I flew to New York City, and I was very politically active on a bunch of these issues. I had been active as a journalist on a bunch of these issues earlier. I was hired in 1990 by a news magazine, NBC, in British Columbia. I was hired particularly because I was a woman, and I was given basically the family beat. These were issues that were really important to me. And I've been very involved in that political side of things. I came home from the Convention on the Rights of the Child to find that my marriage was in really bad shape. And so then I went through this time when my marriage was completely falling apart, and I was a pro-family lobbyist. And I guess I want to say I was not a pro-family lobbyist while the marriage was falling apart. I was doing everything I could for the marriage. But then when I went back to Canada after the marriage fell apart completely, and I went back to Canada, I got invited to get involved again in the pro-family movement, and I was part of that. It is very easy, as we are actively engaged in a cause that really matters, it is very easy to see only one side of the various issues that we work on. I have been guilty of that. And I love, as I've had a whole bunch of beautiful and challenging life experiences to teach me moderation, I love how the Proclamation on the Family stakes out inspired ground that gives us a sense of overarching principles, and also does not give us specific, like political this or political that. It is not a political document. And I really believe that there is room for us to fully embrace the proclamation on the family and embrace our LGBTQ brothers and sisters, and also embrace the gender equality. I believe that is really possible. And I was struck in our last general conference, Elder Rasband spoke about the proclamation. Both Elder Rasband and President Oakes did. Elder Rasband said that there are those who take issue with the Declaration on Family, Marriage, and Gender. Some suggest the church pull it back, revise, or even set the proclamation aside. The proclamation on the family is, as President Hinckley stated, doctrine. My dear brothers and sisters, the principles are not out of step, but perfectly in step with the ways of the Lord and his covenant path. I love that he focuses on the principles. I think it's really important that we recognize those principles. He goes on and he says, some of you may reflect on the proclamation and say, this isn't working for me. It seems insensitive. My family doesn't look like that. My family doesn't look like that. For those with concerns, know that you are a child of heavenly parents, part of your heavenly Father's family. No one knows you better or cares more deeply about you than he does. Turn to him. Pour out your heart to him. Trust him and his promises. You have family in your Savior, Jesus Christ, who loves you. He goes on, and there's lots of beautiful things there in invitation. I really like the idea of holding to the proclamation on the family and taking a nuanced look that is focused on principles rather than political this or that. And like I think what you were saying, Gunnar, one of the fundamental principles is the family as a unit is an often overlooked, but best practices most powerful resource for blessing communities. It starts there. The collective starts there in the family.
Elder Christofferson, now President Christofferson, he pointed out with respect to the family proclamation and people who struggle because they are not in the kind of relationship that the family proclamation paints, whether it's they're single, they're divorced, they have same-sex attraction, any ways that you can imagine just not being a happy family, right? They might even be a family, but just miserable together. It might be a dysfunctional family. He says, no one is predestined to receive less than all the Father has for his children. And I think that's just a wonderful thing to keep in mind. The promises of heaven are for everybody. And for us as individuals, it's all about us working with God to work out the details of our salvation. And we've all come to earth, but we haven't all started in the same place.
Right.
And we haven't all been set on the exact same course. Some of us are running a marathon. Some of us are running a 100-yard dash. Some of us are playing chess. Just everybody has different challenges that they're set to face. And I think that those challenges that we have in our life are uniquely designed for our unique gifts and our potential. I don't want to be insensitive because I can be, but I think the sooner we can embrace our situation and be grateful for whatever our situation is, the sooner we can realize what we can bring to the rest of humanity because of our situation, because of the situation that we're in. And, the world is replete with examples of people who were, given a hand of bad cards and they did something spectacular with them. It's not just the Leonardo da Vinci's of the world, right?
Right, right.
There's always something that we can do, but we got to get out of that mindset of being a victim and blaming everything around us and just say, I'm taking control of my life and I'm moving forward. I'm going to be a grateful person. Find something to be grateful for. I mean,
That gratitude is so powerful, right?
yeah.
So
You were going to go on about community now.
you know what? I actually really want to talk about what you've just mentioned, because the difficult situations in my life have been such a blessing for me in opening up in my heart willingness to be more open to other people's experiences. I used to say, as a pro-family activist, before I dealt with any of the more difficult aspects of dysfunctional marriage, that one of the problems that we had was that we were kind of like all white bread people pursuing our thing, and we needed somebody who had experience with the other side of the question. And I'll tell you, my life experiences have moderated me a whole bunch. But what you've just said about the importance of getting to that place where we are able to embrace the plot of ground God has given us, whatever that plot of ground may be. And it's so important in order to do that embracing that none of us be stuck in a place of self-loathing. And so I feel like as we embrace the principles of the Proclamation on the Family, and we understand that God has sent us to earth to learn to love like Jesus loves, and that the family is this incredible unit where we can learn to love like Jesus loves. Even when it's torturous, there's learning there for us to have.
Joseph Smith had no shortage of trials. This is how he described his situation. He said, I am like a huge, rough stone rolling down from a high mountain. And the only polishing I get is when some corner gets rubbed off by coming in contact with something else, striking with accelerated force against religious bigotry, priestcraft, lawyercraft, doctorcraft, lying editors, suborned judges and jurors, and the authority of perjured executives, backed by mobs, blasphemers, licentious and corrupt men and women, all hell knocking off a corner here and a corner there. Thus, I will become a smooth and polished shaft in the quiver of the Almighty. And I think we all go through that. We might not be dealing with perjured executives, this sort of thing, but I like this. Thus I will become a smooth and polished shaft in the quiver of the Almighty. And as I've gotten to know you better, and we've had our conversations every week here for the last 6 months or so, I would say, in my experience, there are a few people that I know who I would say fit that description better than you, Rebecca. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So in the Proclamation on the Family, not one of us is going to look, if we're not going to read that Proclamation on the Family and go, oh yeah, I got it all down. There's room in there for every one of us to grow. And there are places there where we may not be able to find where we fit yet. My belief is that as we embrace the Proclamation on the Family and remember that we are all brothers and sisters, we are all beloved children of our heavenly parents, that we can also embrace our entire human family. Yes, the ones we're related to by blood, and also the ones we know we're related to by spirit and that are right here in our midst. And we can build family that includes everybody. A few years ago at BYU, there was a group of students who were trying to create a spirit of more inclusion for LGBTQ students. And there was another group of students at BYU who were feeling the need to defend the Proclamation on the Family. And there was kind of like this perspective that you cannot include LGBTQ students and defend the Proclamation on the Family. And there were these two symbols going up everywhere. One was the rainbow and the other was an umbrella. And there's like Desnat got involved. It became quite contentious and it was an angsty time, okay? And I don't want to go into all of that history. But I do think that because we do want to be sensitive, that's part of being a disciple of Jesus Christ, is we want to be sensitive. We want to minister. And sometimes some things are received in a way that expresses a lot of pain on the part of the person who's receiving. And then there's this tendency to, like, right now in the world that we live in, depending on the political community we consider our own, there are words and phrases that are off limits, right? Like, it's just like, and there's this tendency to kind of move to the extreme on both sides because both sides feel like they're under attack. And so I just love, as I went and looked up some of the quotes in Life Help under same-sex attraction, to just point out how beautiful the invitation is in a church that upholds the proclamation on the family. That church is also saying we need to love and include our brothers and sisters and make them welcome, regardless of what other struggles they may be dealing with. So here's Quentin Elcook, who was a state president in California. He talked about the incredible experience of having 17 young men in his stake, all stricken with AIDS, most of whom had not been to church in years and years and years. And his coming to an awareness that these were part of his flock, desperately needing care. And he says, I think that the lesson I learned from that is that as a church, nobody should be more loving and compassionate. No family who has anybody who has same-gender issues should exclude them from the family circle. They need to be part of the family circle. And he talked about bishops helping these young men reconnect with families who had excluded them. It's so important that our families, as a fundamental unit of society, embrace us all wherever we're at and whatever the issues that we're struggling with. The Life Help section is giving some guidance to people when somebody discloses that they are struggling with one of these issues. Although you may not always know how to respond to the struggles your family member faces, you will never regret reaching out with love and understanding. You will never regret saying, I love you. You will never regret throwing your arms around your loved one and hugging him or her. You will never regret listening. You will never regret trying to understand. And then just one more quote. There's so many that are really good. I really recommend the Life Help section. But Carol F. McConkie says, when anyone's shadow darkens the door of the church, they ought to feel immediately embraced and loved and lifted and inspired when they walk out that door to go and be better, because they know the Lord loves them and because they have friends in their faith. And so, like, I would like, whenever I deal with the proclamation on the family, to ask myself, how can I invite my brothers and sisters who don't feel like they fit my understanding of the proclamation? What can I learn? When I look at my experience has been with my daughter who left the church. At first, it was easy to keep my walls up pretty strong. But as I've paused and I've listened, I have learned so much from her that has actually deepened my relationship with the Lord.
And so I want to come back to that, because I feel like you've covered a few things. I want to come back to your daughter and deepening your relationship with the Lord. One of the points that you made before that I don't want to let escape
Yeah.
is you were talking about loving those who are living a lifestyle that's, I'm paraphrasing, living a lifestyle that is incongruent with the teachings of the church. And Clinton L. Cook saying he needed to counsel these families to bring these young men back into the families and such. The comment I wanted to add to the discussion is that we need to remember that Satan's plan is to destroy the families, to take down the family. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is one of the overriding gifts of the family proclamation. It starts by saying that marriage between a man and woman is ordained of God, and that the family is central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of his children. The family is central to the Creator's plan for the eternal destiny of his children. Therefore, now I'm adding my therefore to that scripture. It follows that it's central to Satan's plan to bring us down, right? His plan is to attack and destroy the family is central to his plan. And so whenever we have any kind of contention going on within our own family, we need to realize that that is not God's plan. We might feel righteous in our judgment about another family member, about excluding somebody and saying, okay, that person is now dead to us because of the path that they've chosen. I think that's a moment where we need to sit up and say, hang on, I have been seduced into Satan's plan while I'm trying to be righteous and follow God's plan. Satan has completely seduced me because I think I'm so righteous. I think I'm having righteous indignation. So that means it's righteous, you know? And I've seen families destroyed, not just that relationship with that one kid. You have that issue with that relationship with that one kid, and what ends up happening is the mother and father end up contending. The rest of the kids start taking sides, and before long, the whole family is just gone, just wiped out. And the divorce, it's over because they didn't realize or remember that the number one thing we need to do is love one another. And if we're followers of the Savior's plan, our responsibility is to teach our children the correct principles, but we need to allow them their agency. When they get to that age where they are accountable for themselves. I'm not saying they need to make all their decisions once they're baptized and they're 8 years old, but at some point they're an adult and you just have to say, okay, I'm going to accept you the way you are. I remember my uncle telling me once that the hardest thing for him as a parent, as a father, the hardest thing for him to realize was that he had spent, as those children were growing up, he had spent his whole energy teaching them to see the world through his eyes. And at about the age they're 17 or so, it was now his responsibility to start trying to see the world through their eyes.
Wow.
And it's difficult to go from lecturing to listening, right? The thing that I wanted to add there is just remember, Satan's trying to tear us apart.
I love you bringing that up because I feel like what you're saying is one of the ways that we defend the family, that we uphold the family and make it central to our efforts to bless the world is by loving each other no matter what.
Yeah.
We do not allow our differences to tear our families apart, nor do we ignore them either. We need to be able to be safe to be different. We need to be able to talk across our differences, and we hold fast to each other.
Yeah.
I love that.
So that's what I wanted to jump in there and say. You were starting to talk about something else.
I was just saying that when my daughter's leaving the church did not put her in a situation where she could no longer teach me anything. I've actually learned a lot by listening to her. It has deepened my relationship with the Lord. We talked at the beginning of this about how some people will look at the family proclamation and say, this isn't working for me. I think we have, obviously I get emotional about this. I think we have people coming to church who are getting that message at church that they don't belong. Not only internally, but externally. And often, just like a little pointer, we often assume that we know, we often assume that other people are not dealing with the struggles we don't see. And so it is often easy for people who are feeling defensive to talk about people who are dealing with certain other struggles as a them, and we're an us. And there's very likely somebody in the middle of that us who is actually dealing with the struggle we're talking about, right? And they come to church and they get this, you don't belong, which is so hard on our whole communities and our families. So I think it would be powerful for us to say, how can I look at the Proclamation on the Family and see every one of my brothers and sisters in here? And maybe some of my brothers and sisters are not in a position to be moms and dads.
Well, let me
Proclamation
start
on the
with,
Family is not only...
let me throw the first one out there. First sentence in the second paragraph. All human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God. So why don't we just start with that, right?
Yeah.
And all of our interactions with people are all
Yeah.
created in the image of God.
Yes. And suppose somebody I know doesn't identify as male or female. Even so, they are a beloved child of God, created in the image of God.
And the next sentence is, each is a beloved spirit, son or daughter of heavenly parents,
Yeah.
and as such has a divine nature and destiny.
And every one of us has a role to play inside our families. Every one of us can bless our families. And let us allow each other to bless our families in whatever way we can.
I think it might help us if we are self-reflective enough to acknowledge that people complain about us. People complain about me. People complain about you. They're talking about you behind your back. They're talking about me behind my back. Even our most beloved loved ones. They all have some criticism, right? We're all hardwired to complain. We're all hardwired to find fault. And so none of us are above being found to be short of God's glory. And they're probably right. And if we're short, why should we be accusing others of
Right.
being short
Right.
differently than we are?
Right. Right. Right.
We're all short. We all fall
Yeah.
short of the glory of God. So
Yeah.
let's just put that on the table and say, there you go. Now let's just do the best we can together and be there for each other.
And sorry, there's this other thing going on in my heart right now.
Yeah.
As I say, we all have to, we need to give everybody the opportunity to be part of the family, to contribute to the family. I'm very aware right now of a situation that I'm not going to go into details about, but where somebody has just decided, I am going to take space for safety from family, right? And safety does come first. We do have to sometimes take space for safety.
You mean you're aware of some situations where somebody has decided to step away from their family because they don't feel safe when they're with their family emotionally, psychologically, or some other ways? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm talking about in particular situations I'm aware of where there's been abuse,
Yeah.
such that
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that. I had a mother who I loved dearly, but she was an acquired taste. Right? And when I was a teenager, I realized I needed to not be around my mom. And so I did everything I could to limit any kind of interaction with my mother, including just not coming home. And I can totally relate, and I felt like I really needed that for my own sanity.
Yeah.
And then as I became an adult, I was able to bring her back into my life more and more. Yeah. And by the time she died, we had just a fabulous relationship. But I get it. I certainly get that psychological, emotional abuse thing, but I've seen physical abuse, and I get it. 100% get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even then, there's still something where there's part of us that longs
Yes.
for the family to be whole.
Yeah.
It may be that in some of these situations, that wholeness is not going to be fulfilled until the resurrection. And if that's the case, we can still hold on to our family members by praying for them and putting them on the prayer roll of the temple. That is a way we can still be family.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when we pray for other people in this way, we should consider also praying for ourselves that we receive the kind of sight that will help that relationship. I told you the example of, this is probably one of our way earlier podcasts, of my wife is the greatest blessing of my life, but I think the greatest gift that she gave me was agreeing to marry me despite my mother. I mean, she may have loved me, but my mother's part of the deal. And my mother was going to
Less
be,
than warm and accepting.
she was warm and accepting in her way. She was just a difficult person, right? And I just remember we had been married for a long time. I mean, 30 years. And it was still very stressful for my wife anytime that we were going to be around my mother. And one night my wife prayed, Lord, please help me see her as you see her. And it completely changed. It was, the prayer was answered like instantly. And it completely changed her relationship with my mother. My mother always loved my wife. She just did not express it in a way that my wife recognized, you know. But my mother, in her defense, she was damaged goods. She suffered extreme abuse as a child, physical and psychological. It led an extremely difficult life. Her parents left her when she was 17, 18 years old and moved back to Italy and left her in New York, 17, 18 years old, to raise her two brothers who were like 3 and 6 years younger than her. And so she wasn't just in charge of herself, but she had to run the household and be a mom to two rambunctious, testosterone, hormone-filled teenage boys who weren't going to listen to her. You know what I mean? And that was when life
At the same time that
got
she's
better.
dealing with abandonment.
Right. Right. Yeah. So,
Wow.
so, you know, and this is,
Yeah.
she was born in the middle of the Depression, 1930. So now we're talking just after World War II, maybe 1947 or something. And so she had a tough life. I mean, understanding, we talked a little bit about seeing through their eyes, right? Seeing the world through their eyes. For me, just sort of knowing my mother's history really helped me with my relationship with her, knowing that what she had gone through. And I'm, you know, complaining about my life, about the way my mom treats me, but goodness, my mom treated me a whole lot better than her father treated her. And then I realized when my sons, as adult men, started telling me the psychological damage I did, one of them, so it's about the psychological damage I did to him because when he was 10 years old and he was serving me ice cream in a cup, but I was like, no, there can't be any air pockets. You got to push that ice cream all the way. And when he told me that, I thought, oh, we're all going to screw up. There's no, you can be a perfect parent and your kid is going to find something to complain about.
No, I love it. So we all aspire to be such terrible parents that the worst our kids can say about us is that we took over the ice cream. That's, yeah.
You're trying to be so serious and I'm making jokes. I'm sorry, Rebecca.
No, I think that was awesome. Okay, I want to talk about, because I'm such an expert on it, successful marriages and families are established and maintained on principles of faith, prayer, repentance, forgiveness, respect, love, compassion, work, and wholesome recreational activities. Lots of beautiful stuff there. By divine design, fathers are to preside over their families in love and righteousness, and are responsible to provide the necessities of life and protection for their families. Mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. In these sacred responsibilities, notice sacred. In these sacred responsibilities, fathers and mothers are obligated to help one another as equal partners. Disability, death, or other circumstances may necessitate individual adaptation. Extended families should lend support when needed. So, of course, I want to get into preside. And I want to get into gender equality. But before I head there, Gunnar, what's your response here to any of this?
Yeah, so it was interesting when I reread the proclamation earlier today, this statement about fathers presiding over the family jumped out. And when we spoke just a little bit ago before pushing record, you had mentioned that you wanted to touch on this idea of preside, and I thought that it was interesting that it had jumped out to both of us. My experience in the church, and for those of who may be listening for the first time, I've been a member for 32 years. I'm a convert, so there isn't this long history of precedent about how fathers handle the family and how they preside over a family. So I don't have all that tradition. That it was something for me to learn. It was something for me to ask about and see how people what did this mean. And what I found is that people who'd been members of the church for a long time, so people my age or older, who've been brought up in the church and had sort of a long line of ancestors who were in the church, it seemed to be quite common. I can't say everybody was this way, but it seemed to be quite common that there was this attitude of it's my way. I'm making the decisions, and everybody's falling in line. And the wife wasn't really able to make a decision until she cleared it with her husband, and this kind of thing. Which that doesn't really sit well with me. With my wife, we just sort of have an understanding. There are things, just go make your decisions, and then we kind of let each other know if we think we just made a decision that might affect the other in one way or another. It could be as simple as, by the way, I'm not going to be here Thursday. I'm going to a Relief Society party. And it's, letting me know. That's not something I have to approve or anything, right?
Right.
If I want to go out and buy a car, I better make sure my wife is okay with me buying a car, right? If I want to go ahead and spend $19 on Amazon to buy a present for one of the kids, I might only ask her in case, if it's one of the grandkids, to make sure that we hadn't been told not to do such a thing for the grandkids, right?
Right.
But what really hit me today when I was reading this presiding thing was what I learned about presiding some number of years ago now, 10 years ago or so, when I was serving in the bishopric. And I remember I had to preside at a baptism. And I really didn't like this idea that the people who are officiating sit at the front and look at the whoever it is in the congregation who has come for the baptism, right? Mm-hmm. So I sat with the congregation, and then there's the confirmation and gift of the Holy Ghost that happens, right? And I didn't stand in the circle, right? And the person who was doing the confirmation was a stalwart member, obviously approved by the bishop, and I knew they were completely capable of doing this by themselves, and they did it. And I felt like my role was to, as the presiding authority, was to just make sure things moved along, right? At the baptism, they said the words correctly for the ordinance, right? Afterwards, a friend of mine who had a lot more experience than I did came up to me and just very gently said, Gunnar, as the person presiding, you should stand in the circle and you should stand next to the person who's performing the ordinance. He says, that way, if they say something incorrectly, if they get stuck on something, you can just softly whisper to them and help them, through this ordinance without making a big scene, without having to stand up and walk over there or anything like this and embarrass them. And to me, that was a great lesson on presiding, which the lesson to me was be where you're supposed to be available to be a safety net for that person, to support them in whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, and be very respectful and discreet in providing counsel and loving. So not everybody needs to hear it. You don't need to be like yelling it or make a scene about it, but helping them exercise their authority, right? And do what the Lord would have them do. Great lessons on presiding, and I think it's completely transferable to home life. So in presiding, you should do your interviews with each of the kids. You can do it respectfully, and you can do it in such a way that it's doesn't feel like a formal PPI. You're just driving and talking. You make sure you set time aside. One of the things my son does is he takes the kids out one-on-one for ice cream, and they're just building a relationship, right? But it's also it's a PPI because you're finding out what's going on in their lives, what's important to them, what's going on with their friends and stuff. So that's, and also I think presiding is, it's not directing, right? A good boss at work is one who provides leadership and support, and is the one who sits there and says, okay, we need to develop a product, I don't know, to compete with product X from the competition. What what are your ideas? It's like Hertz, William Randolph Hertz said something like, I would rather make 10% of everybody's efforts in my organization than 100% of my own efforts.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think when you think about a family, it's the same way. If you're just being a puppet master, as a family, you're not going to blossom. You need to help your family blossom. So those are my thoughts on presiding. I don't know if I said anything that was meaningful to you.
I love it all. And I love that you mentioned the way that 30 years ago,
Yeah.
when we talked about presiding, we talked with language that we have a better understanding today than we had then.
Yeah.
We've got some really good quotes. Like Gordon B. Hinckley said, in the marriage companionship, there's neither inferiority or superiority. In an Ensign article called Achieving Oneness in Marriage, it says this side-by-side equal partnership manifests itself in all aspects of the marriage relationship, including how couples make decisions together. To be one, we must counsel with our spouse in all things and strive to come to a union of mind and heart on all matters.
I mean, it is so true that I don't see things my wife sees.
Yeah.
I don't understand things that she understands. And in a world from the 1960s, 1970s even, that was really run by men, they would just make fun of women. But I think today, more generally, men really respect women because it's so true that they see the connections to everything. They see how, I mean, it's a broad statement to say that, but my experience has been that women see more interconnectivity between other human beings than men do. I was listening to this professor in psychology speak, and he said that as a general rule, it's not hard and fast, but as a general rule, women are more interested in people and men are more interested in things. So you see more men in engineering. If you want to get a group of engineers together, go look in any engineering department, there are more men in that department than there are women. That doesn't mean that there are no women, but men are more attracted to things. Engineering is about things and making other things out of things, right? And you go into nursing, you're going to see predominantly women. You'll see men, but it's predominantly women because women are more interested in people. And I think I think it helps if we stop and think about that, because when I see a problem, I see things. I see things that need to be fixed. I need things that need to be bought. I see things that need to be sold, right? I need things we need to get rid of, and I see things that other people have that I wish I had. that's kind of it's things. My wife, she sees people. She sees people. She sees people in need. She sees people. She finds out about what's going on in people's lives. She about things that she sees, people that she can help. She sees people that need help, that she needs to go find somebody to help. It's completely different. And we're looking at the same situation. And so we bring it together. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I want to take a quote and then I want to carry on that. So
Yeah.
what you just said something reminds me of a quote by President Nelson, where he, first of all, he expresses grief about the history of marginalization, abuse, disrespect, sidelining, misjudging of women. He says, such offenses have no place in the kingdom of God. And then he says, conversely, it thrills me when I learn of priesthood leaders who eagerly seek the participation of women in ward and state councils. I am inspired by each husband who demonstrates that his most important priesthood responsibility is to care for his wife. I praise that man who deeply respects his wife's ability to receive revelation and treasures her as an equal partner in their marriage. So, given all of that, given that we're understanding better today than we understood 30 years ago, about the equality of men and women. You've already basically answered that whole question of preside. But I also had to do a little bit of struggle with it. I've struggled with this for a long, long time. Why does a husband have the responsibility to preside? And here are some thoughts I have. First of all, in a lot of cultures, we have male initiation rites, where a man becomes a man. We don't really have that in our culture. But I'll tell you, mothers have an initiation rite called pregnancy and childbirth. And I will tell you that that crucible changes who we are. And that crucible over generations changes what we think of when we think of womanhood. There's a whole lot of socialization that prepares us for that crucible, which is pregnancy and childbirth and early motherhood, when you cannot possibly get enough sleep to care for that helpless infant that is dependent upon you for everything. If I were a heavenly parent wanting to give my children an opportunity to learn to deeply love, I cannot think of a better opportunity than that opportunity. And we have men who don't get that opportunity. And especially if they're biologically wired, if their brains are wired, which I think there's some evidence that it is, that the male brain is wired differently from the female brain, so that there's a tendency of the male brain to see things in terms of things instead of in terms of people. I feel that as a woman, I have more power than I tend to understand. And that the Lord, in giving his sons the call to preside, I really think he's balancing things out. So that opportunity to develop Christ-like love is handed, like that women have it by biological reality. Women are given this opportunity. And then by the sociological forces that support that biological reality, even if you've never been a mother, even if that opportunity has never come into your life, still focus on people and needs, and you have these things that draw you naturally to learning how to love like Jesus loves. And then we have men who have the opportunity to either deeply and proactively extend themselves in order to gain those opportunities in other ways, or to be another one of the kids in the family, right? And you can either be part of the problem or you can be part of the solution. And so then I want to tell a few stories that I think connect with this. One of the stories is Thomas S. Monson's story. And I'm just going to quote his own words on this. He says, "One day as we left the chapel for our classrooms," this was in primary. He was a rambunctious primary student. "One day as we left the chapel for our classrooms, I noted that our primary president remained behind. I paused and observed her. She sat all alone on the front row of the benches, took out her handkerchief, and began to weep. I walked up to her and said, 'Sister Georgelle, don't cry.' She said, 'I'm sad.' I responded, 'What's the matter?' She said, 'I can't control the trail builders. Will you help me?' Of course, I answered yes. She said, 'Oh, that would be wonderful, Tommy, if you would.' What I didn't know then is that I was one of those responsible for her tears. She had effectively enlisted me to aid in achieving reverence in our primary. And we did.
Yeah.
We all need a responsibility.
I think one of the wonderful things about the priesthood. All right. So let me start by saying, I don't know why men get the priesthood, men are ordained to the priesthood and the women aren't. I don't know why men are told to preside and women aren't. I don't know why. I don't know the answers. But I can tell you this, that my experience as a man who has had a lot of male friends is that we spend an inordinate amount of energy thinking about ourselves and not really caring what's going on with other people. It's all a competition, and we're all trying to come out on top. And it doesn't matter what it is. Best lawn in the neighborhood, nicest car, best desk. I mean, it's stupid stuff. Best title at work. One of the things I learned at work is if you wanted to make a man happier in his job, give him a bigger title. Don't change his pay. Don't change the job. Just give him a bigger title, something that he can feel good about. You want to have the same impact on a woman? You have to give her more money. She doesn't care about the title. You got to give her more money. But men are wired, they got this big ego and it's totally self-centered. And if you're having a conversation with a man, it's going to take less than 10 seconds before he's going to grab that conversation and start talking about himself. It's hard. It's hard for me. You give an example, I'll be like, oh, yeah, I got an example of that. That happened to me. I saw that same thing. I've probably done it 18 times in this episode alone. It's hard. It's hard to just listen and go, oh, yeah. Oh, Rebecca, tell me some more about that. Oh, that must have really hurt, Rebecca. That does not come naturally to me, right? And I don't think it comes naturally to men in general, right? But the priesthood is all about service. There's no aspect of the priesthood that when you're exercising it right is not about thinking about somebody else, working on doing something for somebody else. That somebody else could be a member of your family. It could be a member outside the family. It could be a member of the ward. It could be anything, but you're thinking about other people. And so I really feel like men need the priesthood because they are not empathetic and they need to learn how to be empathetic. And women are, by their very nature, already there.
I want to just quickly,
Yeah,
I want to just point out that we're talking in generalizations.
absolutely.
I know some men who are among the most empathetic people on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Just like the word of wisdom was adapted to the capacity of the weakest of all. The roles that we're talking about, the Lord established a program for the family, for the human family, that is maybe some of these people don't need the priesthood in order to, maybe some of the men do not need the priesthood in order to be successful in their acquiring of Christ-like attributes. But the priesthood will be a blessing in their lives. It absolutely will. And it will be a blessing. And those men, that their priesthood will be a blessing in every life that they touch. Dr. Carlfred Broderick was a Latter-day Saint therapist who wrote an awesome book that helped me understand this when I was grappling with it. He told this story about a time when he was counseling with a couple where the wife was very socially adept, very loving, sensitive. She would go to every single BYU Education Week, and she would listen carefully to all the lessons about raising families, and she would come home and she would try as ardently as she could to put these things into practice. And her husband had no patience for all that mumbo jumbo. And he was a tell them what to do and hit them if they don't sort of guy. And each one of their sons, as soon as he got old enough to leave home, left home as fast as possible. And now they were left with one daughter, and she was still at home. But she had started to act out in some ways that were very difficult for the family. So the wife had finally persuaded her husband to counsel with the stake president, who also happened to be a counselor, because this guy had no patience for counselors whatsoever. But he did believe in priesthood authority. He did believe in the stake president, so he went to go meet with the stake president. And Dr. Broderick says as soon as he walked in the doors, as soon as the couple sat down, the wife started saying, President Broderick, don't you think we would get further with our daughter if we were, she started to do all of this. And he felt then prompted to stop her. And he turned to the husband and he said, you don't get very much respect, do you?
To the husband?
Husband's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I respect you. And I want you to know that if your daughter, if we are going to be able to help your daughter, it's going to be in the Lord's way with you as the head of the family. So what do we need to do to help your daughter? And the man's like, I don't know. And the stake president says, okay, well, why don't you go home and fast and pray and come back next week and we can counsel about how we can help your daughter under your direction. Husband's like, okay. And the wife wants to stay behind and continue talking with him. And he says, no, I'll walk you both out to the car. Like, he wanted to make it really clear to this man that he wasn't being ambushed.
Right.
So they go out to the car, and next week they come in, and Dr. Broderick, as soon as he could get a word in edgewise, because the desperate wife is trying so desperately, and if I were to sit with Dr. Broderick today, he's passed away, but I would have said, Dr. Broderick, that wife also needs support. But anyway, but Dr. Broderick says to the husband, what did the Lord tell you needs to be done to help your daughter? And he says, oh, I thought you'd forgotten. President Broderick says, no. Well, what? You're the person with the keys here. How are we to help your daughter? And this brother says, well, I got that she's supposed to read her patriarchal blessing. Well, Dr. Broderick knew that girl was not willing to read her patriarchal blessing. He was counseling with her in private. He knew that very well. But he's like, okay, well, so how about you invite her to read her patriarchal blessing and come back next week and we'll see how that went. So he goes home and he invites her to read her patriarchal blessing, and she says absolutely not, and he comes back and the stake president says, so how did that go? Well, she wouldn't do it. He said, okay, so what do we do now? The dad says, well, I don't know. I asked her to read her patriarchal blessing and she wouldn't read it. And President Broderick says, well, I'm sure the Lord has more tools than that. So why don't you go find out what the Lord would have you do now and come back next week and we'll talk about it. So he comes back in a week and he says, I got that I should walk and talk with her. And actually, the stake president and the mom were both floored, because this was not a guy who knew how to walk and talk with anyone. And he went home that night and he said to his daughter, come on a walk with me. And then they paced around the backyard as he talked to her about how much he loved her and how it hurt to watch her throwing herself away. And over the next several months, those two developed a bond that was deeply redemptive. And the girl later told the stake president, I would never have believed that my dad could change. But if he can change, maybe I can change too. I just think that's an interesting story about the power of recognizing you have a responsibility to preside. And then one more story. So I told
But, what was also nice was that the wife gave him space. You don't hear the Spirit where there's a lot of noise, where there's a lot of contention.
Yes.
And so he fasted, he prayed. He had to take some time to try to hear the Lord's voice. In my own life, when we've had issues like that, it's my wife and I counsel together. And we've expressed our thoughts, and we've prayed and come back to say, well, this is what I was impressed by, and that's what I was impressed by. And so it always seems to work out. I think it's worked out.
Yeah.
I don't know that we have unresolved issues. I'll find out after she listens to this podcast.
Well, and that is the Lord's way, right?
Yeah.
It is the Lord's way that we counsel together. In that situation, the husband did not know how to hear the voice of the Lord.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until his priesthood leader introduced him to his responsibility to get the Lord's direction that he was able to start hearing the voice of the Lord.
Yeah.
And I would hope eventually to be able to hear both the Lord and his wife. Okay, so one more story. This is, I told you at the beginning of this that I went to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child in 2000 or 2001. I don't remember which one it was. I remember one session that made a huge impact on me. I went to a presentation by UNICEF at this convention, and this woman got up and she talked about the difficulty that they were having at UNICEF when they tried to care for families without enrolling the father in the process. It wound up creating dysfunction in the families in these refugee camps. and that they suddenly understood that what they were doing was disenfranchising the fathers, who prior to this period of time had a role in the family of being a provider, and now UNICEF is the provider, right? And UNICEF is providing the protection. The dads no longer felt like they had something to contribute to the family, and they tended to disengage from the family. And so then UNICEF actually changed how it was structuring aid so that it relied upon the fathers. And then the families began to prosper. And I thought that was such a fascinating thing.
Yeah, I think guys need to feel like they have a responsibility. If they don't, we're all wired to eat potato chips, pizza, and play video games. Watch football.
And I think it's important that it's not just that you feel like you have a responsibility. You do have a responsibility, right?
Yeah, but not everybody realizes that.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's what I wrote my song about this week.
I am so excited to hear it because your songs always catch me off guard. Your lyrics are so gorgeous. So why don't we listen to it?
Unruly and all I could want her to be. She trusts me with her hand. We'll build a family devoted to you. In covenant we stand. I don't want to lead from ahead or above. I just want to walk at her side. A partner who honors all that she is. So why am I called to preside? How's it fair to preside? She's crawled through the valley of shadow and death and bled to bring them here. Her sacrifices remind me of you, and you use them to draw her near. How can I lead when she has the edge? Biology weighs on her side. Her sense of their needs seems to be innate. So how am I supposed to preside? What does it mean to preside? You say that I matter, that I'm needed too. You've given me gifts, something vital to do. I plead for my family, it draws me to you. Is that the whole point of preside? We're leading together, equally yoked, embracing our life side by side. I'm accounting to you for our family's needs. Is this what it means to preside? Equal as I preside.
Rebecca, I think that's a very profound song with some very profound ideas that are, I think, appropriate for everybody to really hear and understand. And I understand your wrestle with this, and so the song I find is really meaningful. I hope everybody enjoys the song as much as I did, and as much as I think it deserves to be celebrated. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Gunnar.
So what was your big learning? What do you think was your big takeaway tonight from this family proclamation? Did you learn anything new?
Yeah, so Gunnar, your story about being in the bishopric, being presiding at a meeting, and learning that it was important for you to be in certain places, not because it gives you honor, but because it puts you in a place where you can be a better servant, where you're able to be aware and to serve. I really loved that. I loved that perspective on presiding.
Yeah, that was a big learning for me at that time. I think for me, one of the things I just really loved, and it's something I always knew, but it's just so great to hear it in words. And that was President Christofferson when he said, no one is predestined to receive less than all that the Father has for his children. Just stop the judging, love them, love everybody, so that they can be open to the love of God. We all have something we're working on. We all have something we can be better at. And let's put all that energy into that self-improvement energy and that self-improvement counsel. Let's put that energy into ourselves. And because as we become better servants, as we become better disciples, we lift everybody naturally, lift everybody around us. That was, I think, my takeaway.
I love that.
So with that, I think we're ready to wrap up another episode of Still Learning. We're so glad that you were able to join us, and we look forward to your comments. And remember, we're still learning, just like you. We'll see you next week.